Chapter 5, The Truth Beneath the Veil. The jungle was alive with sound, chirping insects, rustling leaves, and the occasional distant growl of a predator. Kael pushed through the thick foliage, the staff glowing faintly in his grip, lighting his way. The serpent's warning echoed in his mind, the road ahead will only grow harder. He had no idea how much harder. Ahead, the jungle opened into a clearing. In its center stood a massive stone structure, its surface etched with intricate carvings that shimmered in the dim light. The air here felt heavy, charged with an energy that made Kael's skin prickle. As he approached, the carvings seemed to shift, forming words in a language he didn't recognize. But somehow, he understood them. "Speak the truth, and the door will open." Kael hesitated. "The truth," he whispered. The staff pulsed in his hand, and he took a deep breath. I'm afraid. I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this." The carvings glowed brighter, and the ground trembled. The massive stone door creaked open, revealing a dark chamber within. Kael stepped inside, his heart pounding. The chamber was vast and cold, the walls lined with mirrors that reflected his every move. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it rested a glowing crystal. The song of the veil hummed faintly in the air, growing louder as Kael approached the crystal. As he reached out, a voice rang out behind him. "Do you really think you can save them, Kael?" Kael spun around, his breath catching in his throat. Standing before him was himself. But this version of Kael was older, his face lined with sorrow and his eyes hard. Who are you?" Kael demanded. The older Kael smirked. "I'm you, obviously. Or rather, what you will become." "That's not possible," Kael said, shaking his head. "Oh, it is," the older Kael replied, stepping closer. "And it's time you knew the truth about the veil." Kael felt a chill run down his spine. "What truth?" "The balance is a lie," the older Kael said, his voice sharp. "The veil wasn't created to protect our world, it was created to imprison something far worse. Something that wants to break free." Kael's grip tightened on the staff. "You're lying." "Am I?" the older Kael said, raising an eyebrow. "Why do you think the veil would chose you?" "It's not because you're special, Kael. It's because you're expendable. A pawn in a game you don't even understand." Kael's mind raced. Could this really be true? Had everything he believed been a lie? "No," he said firmly. "I don't believe you. The Veilwood wouldn't call me if it didn't believe I could help." The older Kael laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Believe what you want. But when the veil falls, and the thing it was created to hold escapes, you'll realize the truth. And by then, it'll be too late." Before Kael could respond, the older version of himself vanished, leaving the chamber silent. Kael turned back to the pedestal, his heart pounding. The crystal still glowed, its light pulsing in time with the song. He reached out and touched it. The moment his fingers made contact, a flood of visions filled his mind. He saw the creation of the veil, the battle that raged to trap the darkness within it, and the countless lives lost to keep it contained. And then he saw the darkness stirring, pushing against the boundaries of the veil, eager to escape. When the visions faded, Kael dropped to his knees, gasping for breath. The truth was clear now. The veil wasn't just a barrier, it was a prison. And if it broke, the entire world would be consumed. The staff pulsed in his hand, its light brighter than ever. Kael stood, his resolve hardening. "I don't care what the truth is," he said aloud. "If the veil falls, people will die. And if I'm the only one who can stop that, then so be it." The chamber began to collapse around him, the walls crumbling as the crystal's light consumed the space. Kael ran, barely making it out of the stone structure before it fell to rubble. As he stood in the clearing, the jungle eerily quiet around him, Kael looked at the staff in his hand. He didn't know if he could win this fight, but he knew one thing for certain. The darkness wasn't going to wait. And neither would he.